The emergency room sounded like metal trying to breathe. Monitors alarmed, shoes struck tile. A crash cart rolled past me so fast one wheel lifted, and somewhere behind the curtain, my half-brother Julian was bleeding faster than the doctors could replace what he was losing. My father, Richard Vance, was screaming, "Take hers!" Every person in the trauma bay went still for half a second. He pointed at me. I sat in a wheelchair near the wall, wrapped in a grey blanket, too weak to stand without help. "Hent, she has the same blood," he shouted. "You know what she is. Draw from her now." The attending physician turned from Julian's bed. "Sir, she is medically unstable." "I don't care." My father stepped closer. 500 milliliters, a liter if you have to. The doctor stared at him. "Absolutely not." Richard grabbed my chair. "She's been giving him blood for years." Silence. The nurse beside me slowly looked down at my bruised arms. Not fresh bruises, old ones. Layered. Needle marks. Tape scars. A history nobody in that room could unsee anymore. The doctor picked up my lab sheet. His expression changed, then changed again. "Sir." My father spun. "What? We cannot draw from her." "Why?" "Her counts are dangerously low. Her marrow function is severely suppressed. She needs treatment herself." Richard's face twisted. "No." The doctor continued. "If we take more blood, we risk killing her." Richard looked at me. Not like a father hearing his daughter might die. Like a businessman hearing inventory had spoiled. "You did this." His voice dropped. "You useless little," he lunged. Before he reached me, the double doors opened. Not kicked down, no cinematic explosion. Just two hospital security officers stepping aside as a tall older man walked in with 3 attorneys, a federal investigator, and a woman from hospital administration, Arthur Vance, my grandfather, and the man who had believed for 15 years that I was dead. Stopped when he saw me. The room changed. Power does that sometimes, not because someone shouts, because everyone else suddenly understands who will be answering questions later. Arthur stared at my face, then my arms, then Richard. His voice was very quiet. "What did you do to my granddaughter?" My father went white. Julian's monitor screamed behind the curtain. Ilara, the woman who had spent years calling herself my guardian while sleeping in my father's bed, backed against the wall. Arthur looked at her, then at Richard, then back at me. I had imagined this moment for months. Sometimes in the glass room, sometimes while pretending to sleep, sometimes while counting the tiny cracks in the ceiling. I thought I would smile. I didn't. I was too tired. I just said, "My name is Anya Vance." Arthur closed his eyes. 1 second, then opened them. "Yes," he said, like he'd been waiting 15 years to hear it. "To understand how I ended up in that emergency room, I have to go back to the beginning, not the real beginning. I don't remember that. The beginning I remember was glass. I was 6 years old when I first understood the room had a door I could not open. Before that, children accept architecture. A locked room is just a room. A camera is just a room. A camera is just something in the corner. A white coat is just what adults wear when they come to take blood. I called Richard Dad because he told me to. I called Alara Miss Alara because she told me not to call her mum. I called Julian my brother because he was always there after they took blood. He sat in a chair, pale, thin, spoiled, waiting. I was told I had been adopted, rescued, chosen. "You were sick when we found you," Richard said. That was his favorite story. "You were abandoned," Alara would add. "Your father gave you everything. Everything meant a glass-walled room in a secure wing of the estate, a bed, a desk, a bathroom, a television with no internet, books selected for me, meals delivered through a service hatch, no school, no friends, no outdoors unless the courtyard was empty, no questions about the locked medical cabinet. And every week, sometimes more often, a doctor came. Not the same one. That would have created relationships. Richard liked rotation. People are easier to control when nobody sees enough of the pattern. The first doctor I remember clearly had grey glasses. He tied a band around my arm. I asked, "Why do I have to do this?" Richard stood behind him. "Because Julian is sick." I looked at my brother, the Rafe. I was 6. He sat on a sofa eating crackers. "Does it hurt him?" Richard frowned. "What, if I don't?" He looked at me for a long moment. "Yes, Children understand responsibility before they understand coercion. I held out my arm. That became my childhood. The raw, rest, iron-rich meals, injections, tests, more drawers. Sometimes I fainted. Sometimes I vomited. Sometimes I vomited. Sometimes I woke with Richard yelling at someone because the amount wasn't enough. The words changed as I got older. Units, counts, compatibility, rod null, golden blood. That was the first term that made me think I was special. I was 12. A young nurse whispered it while labeling a bag. You know how rare this is? I shook my head. She looked at my face, then at Richard behind the glass. Very. He entered before she could say more. She never came back. I asked him later, what does golden blood mean? It means you're useful. I waited for the rest. There wasn't any. At 13, I started keeping records. Not on paper. Paper was searched. In memory. Dates, names, which how long, who came, how Richard behaved afterward. I memorized the pattern of the keypad. Not the code, just the sound. 4 beeps. Pause, too. I watched everything. That is what happens when a child has no control over space. Attention becomes survival. Elora liked to remind me what I owed. She wore silk robes even at breakfast. Always smelled like expensive amber perfume. Your father saved you. I know. Julian needs you. I know. You should be grateful you're good for something. That one came later, around 15. By then, Julian was 18 and healthy enough to travel, date, and complain about how much he hated hospital food. He knew exactly why I existed. One afternoon, after a draw left me dizzy, he came into the glass room carrying a new phone. Look! I stared at it. What? My car. He showed me a photograph. Black sports coupe. I had never been inside a car alone. Nice, you sound jealous, I'm tired. He laughed, you're always tired. I looked at him. He knew, he always knew. I don't like doing this, he shrugged. You don't have to like it. What if I stop? His face changed. Not fear. Offense. Like I'd threatened to steal something from him. You can't. Why? Because it's what you're for. That sentence stayed longer than any needle mark. What you're for. I stopped looking at him as a brother that day. Not because he was sick. Illness is not character. Because he had chosen ownership. The truth began with a tablet. I was 17. A nurse named Mara had been assigned for 2 weeks because one of Richard's regular contractors was unavailable. She was different, not heroic. Not at first, just observant. She asked if I went to school. I said, here, she frowned. Online. No. She looked at Richard, who was on the phone, and at me. How old are you? 17. Her face became still. The next day she asked, do you have a doctor who isn't connected to this house? I did not understand. All doctors are connected to the house. That answer frightened her. She left her tablet in my room accidentally. At least, I thought it was accidental. Years later, Mara told investigators she had done it on purpose. The screen was unlocked. There was a hospital portal open. My name was in a recent lab upload. Nifa. Val. But not the name Richard used for me. He called me Anya Reed. I stared. Vilam. Vance. One letter different. I clicked. The file contained a scanned lab request, then a linked historic record. DNA compatibility. Infant female. Mother, Helena Vance. Father, Richard Vance. My hands went cold. I searched the name Helena. A newspaper archive loaded. Hilly N.A. Vance. Wife of Hesher, wife card Vance. D. Tizer 31. Then, Winafunter Ducada lost in Tra, decried the Skirab ascertent. No. I zoomed in. A family photograph. Arthur Vance. Richard, Helena. A baby. Ear me. Same birthmark near the left ear. Same shape of eyes. The room felt like it tilted. I kept searching. Corporate records. Vance Global. Arthur Vance, founder. Richard Vance, former executive vice president. Former, to get a vice president. Former, there were articles about a family rupture 15 years earlier. The Richard leaving the board. Arthur refusing comment. Then medical files. Julian, a mother. Elara Mendez, father. Richard Vance. I stopped breathing. Elara. The woman in silk. The woman who told me I had been rescued from the streets. She was Julian's mother. I was not adopted. I had not been abandoned. I was Richard's legitimate daughter, Helena's child, Arthur Vance's granddaughter, and according to the world, dead. I kept scrolling until the tablet dimmed. One file was worse than the rest. An internal note from a private physician. Infant Anya demonstrates rare Rod-Knoll phenotype. Potential compatibility value significant given Julian's congenital hematologic complications. Julian had been a toddler. I had been a baby. Richard knew before he made me disappear. The glass room had not been built after he rescued me. It had been built because of me. I heard footsteps. I closed everything. Put the tablet back. Mara entered. Her eyes went to the device, then me. Did you see? I stared. She closed the door. Richard was not nearby. She whispered, I'm sorry. That was the first apology anyone had ever given me for something they actually understood. I said, Is Arthur Vance alive? Her face changed. Yes. Can I contact him? Mara looked at the camera. Not from here. Then help me. She swallowed. I could lose my license. I looked at my arms. I could lose more. She closed her eyes, then nodded. Not immediately, not recklessly. She contacted a patient rights attorney first. The attorney contacted an investigator. The investigator verified records. Only then did a message reach Arthur. No hacking, no secret poison pills, no movie trick, just evidence crossing a wall my father thought was complete. I had one task. Act normal? That was harder than escape. Every morning I woke knowing my entire life was a crime scene. Every evening, Richard walked in and called me ungrateful. Every week, Julian waited for blood, and I had to pretend I still believed I owed it. Mara began documenting everything, quietly, amount drawn, frequency, my symptoms, unsafe decisions, orders that exceeded what independent clinicians considered appropriate. She sent copies outside the house. The pattern was worse than I knew. Years of excessive extraction. Drugs meant to push my body to recover faster between draws. Not illegal because of the names. Illegal because of how they were being used. No legitimate treatment plan. No independent consent. No pediatric oversight. No advocates. My body had spent 13 years being forced to replace what they kept taking. By 18, it was fading. I developed fevers, bone pain, infections, dizziness. My counts recovered slower. Richard blamed me. You're not eating. I am. You're hiding food. I'm not. He ordered more tests. The contracted doctors found what Mara already suspected. My marrow was exhausted, suppressed, damaged, not permanently maybe, but seriously. Richard responded the way he always did. He demanded more. She has to recover. One doctor said, she needs a break. Richard stepped closer. You worked for me. The doctor left. A different one came next week. That was how the system survived. Replace anyone who said no. Arthur's investigators moved carefully because Richard had money, private security, and people willing to falsify records. Arthur himself did not contact me yet. That hurt. I had imagined a grandfather as rescue. A voice, a promise. Instead, I got silence. Mara explained, They're building the case. I don't care. If he moves too soon, Richard could move you. Where exactly? That shut me up. Patients became another form of survival. 6 months later, Julian got worse. His underlying condition had progressed. Doctors changed treatment. Hospital visits increased. He started needing transfusions more often. Richard's demands on me increased too. Mara objected. She was fired. I cried after she left. Not because she had abandoned me, because she was the first person who had made the room feel temporary. Without her, the glass looks thicker. But the outside case continued. I knew because once a week a new nurse came with a phrase embedded in ordinary conversation. Wither is changing. That meant investigation active. Then, your grandfather likes Winter. That meant Arthur received the evidence. Then some doors opened from both sides. That meant be ready. I lived for those sentences. The hidden truth about my mother came later, not from Richard, not from Alara, from a forensic review of Helena Vance's medical records. Her death had been called a sudden medication reaction. Arthur had always doubted it. He had not been able to prove anything. Our investigators found irregular prescriptions authorized through a clinic link to Richard, messages, payments, a pattern suggesting deliberate interference, enough to reopen the case. Not enough for me to know every detail. I didn't want every detail. Helena stopped being the dead woman in an article. She became my mother. A woman who had discovered Richard's affair. A woman who had threatened divorce. A woman who had planned to take me and leave. Then she died, and I disappeared. But Richard had not built the glass room only to save Julian. He had built it to erase me. Julian's health made me useful. Inheritance made me dangerous. When I learned that, something changed, not into revenge, into ownership. I no longer wanted Richard to see me as a daughter. That wish had been the last chain. I wanted the truth to see me. That was enough. The night Julian collapsed, I was 19. Dinner happened upstairs. I knew because the kitchen camera audio carried through the amazement monitor. A crash. Ilara screamed. Richard shouted Julian's name, then footsteps, fast. The glass room door opened. 2 security men entered. Richard, behind them. Get her. I backed away. No. His face was wild. Julian is bleeding. No. He crossed the room and grabbed my arm. You don't get to say no. That sentence became central in court later. Because he was wrong, he dragged me upstairs. First time in months I'd seen the main house. Marble, paintings, sunlight through windows, the absurdity of wealth. Outside, a black SUV waited. I was put in a back seat beside Ilara. She held Julian's hand while he lay across the other seats. He was conscious. Barely. He looked at me. Help me out. I stared. For 13 years he had never asked. He had instructed, demanded, mocked. Now help me. I looked away. The private hospital knew Richard too well. He entered through a side bay. Julian went directly to trauma. I was pushed into a chair. A nurse started to grab my arm. I pulled away. No. Richard slapped the counter. Do it. The nurse froze. I'm not consenting, I said it loudly. The room stopped. That sentence was new. Richard grabbed my shoulder. You're confused. No, she is a dependent. I'm 19. The attending physician looked at him. She is an adult. Richard's face changed. She doesn't understand. I understand. I looked at the doctor. My name is Anya Vance. I have been held in Richard Vance's house and used for blood extraction without independent consent. The nurse slowly stepped back. Richard went white. Ilara whispered. Shut up. I continued. There is an active investigation. That was when the physician ordered security. Richard exploded. Take her, Barbard. The doctor refused. Then my labs came back. Critically low counts, marrow suppression, systemic exhaustion from repeated extraction and medical manipulation. The doctor read them twice. She needs protection. Richard looked at me like I had betrayed him by being medically fragile. Julian's condition worsened behind the curtain. Doctors did not stop treating him. They used every appropriate option available. That mattered. No one in that room turned medicine into punishment. No one said he deserved to die. They treated him because he was a patient. They protected me because I was one too. Then Arthur arrived. He did not bring 30 armed men. He brought enough security to move safely and enough lawyers to make every administrator listen. Federal investigators came with him. The first thing he did was not look at Richard. He looked at me, my granddaughter. His voice broke. This once. I had spent months imagining a ruthless patriarch. What I saw was an old man who had been grieving a dead infant for 15 years. He approached slowly. May I touch you? The question destroyed me. May I? 2 words. Consent, I nodded. He put one hand on my shoulder. Lightly, I cried. Not elegantly, not silently. My whole body shook. Arthur held me. Richard shouted from across the bay, Father, you don't understand. Arthur turned. Every softness disappeared. I understand enough. Federal agents stepped toward Richard. Ilara tried to leave. Security blocked her. Julian's doctors continued working. The rooms separated into 2 worlds. Medicine, law. For the first time in my life, neither belonged to Richard. Arthur asked me, do you want to leave? I looked at the trauma bay, at the glass doors, at the exit. Yes. So we left. Not while Julian died. Not while anyone celebrated. I went to another secure hospital floor. A hematology team treated me, real doctors, independent. No money from Richard. No family instructions. They explained my marrow could recover with time, rest, and proper care. No promises. Good. I had been raised on promises used as chains. I preferred probabilities. The next morning, Arthur sat beside my bed. He had brought no flowers, only a folder. Your mother, I stared. Helena, he nodded. Inside were photographs, not evidence photos. Life. Helena laughing on a sailboat. Helena holding me. Helena asleep with me on her chest. Helena arguing at a board meeting. Arthur said she was difficult. I smiled through tears. Good. He laughed, then cried. He told me the story slowly. Helena had discovered Richard's affair with Alara. Julian was already alive. Richard feared divorce. More than divorce, he feared Arthur. The Vance Trust was structured around legitimate descendants. Helena planned to expose everything. Then she died. Richard claimed medication reaction. 2 weeks later, baby Anya died. Arthur believed both tragedies were connected, but grief and suspicion are not evidence. Richard disappeared from corporate life, took Alara and Julian, built his own network. Arthur searched for years, then stopped publicly, not privately. Why didn't you find me? I asked. His face collapsed. Because your father made sure every record said you were gone. I looked away. I should have done more. I turned back. Maybe. He flinched. I did not comfort him. Not yet. People who love you can still fail you. That does not make them restored. It also does not make the failure disappear. Arthur nodded. Maybe. That answer was enough for the first day. The criminal case widened. Kidnapping, unlawful confinement, medical abuse, fraud, identity falsification, financial crimes, evidence related to Helena's death, unlicensed medical contractors, Julian's role, Elira's role. The medical logs were devastating. Years, amounts, payments, instructions. Richard writing keep her isolated. Another. No external pediatric record. Another. If counts recover by Friday, draw again. The court did not need dramatic language. The record spoke. Alara claimed she had been trapped by Richard. Then prosecutors showed messages where she complained that I was getting too much food, where she asked whether the glass could be frosted because Julian hated seeing me, where she told the nurse she exists for him. Julian was different. He had been a child when the system began. That mattered. But he became an adult inside it. By 18, he knew I was confined. By 19, he knew transfusions happened without independent consent. He still treated me as property. The prosecution separated childhood from adult choices. Good. I did too. Arthur wanted them destroyed. That word, destroyed. He used it in a private meeting. I was recovering at his estate by then, not a fortress. A large old house with too many rooms and a library that smelled like dust. He said, I will destroy Richard. I looked at him. No. He stared. You don't want justice? I do. Then what? I want evidence. He leaned back. I continued. I want trials. Yes. I want doctors investigated. Yes. I want every record corrected. Of course. I want my mother's case reopened. His jaw tightened. Yes. And I want you to stop talking like you're a king. Silence. Then, unexpectedly, Arthur laughed. Helena. What? You sound like your mother. I hated how much I liked that. The inheritance issue came next. Legally, my identity restoration changed everything. I was Richard's legitimate daughter, Arthur's only surviving grandchild through Helena. Julian was also Richard's biological son, but outside the marriage and outside the original trust structure. That did not make him less human. It did affect inheritance instruments. The media became obsessed. True, called him Bloodgrander, Blut Gardenbladgrander. The Vance Goat Kvandegelutter. The Vance Goat. I hated all three. Arthur's PR team wanted a statement. I wrote my own. My medical history is not a family brand. I am cooperating with investigators. I asked that reporting distinguish between genetics, legal inheritance, and human worth. A journalist asked Arthur whether Julian was less Vance. Arthur said, no. I looked at him, surprised. He continued, bloodline is a legal fact in some documents. It is not a measure of human value. That was growth, for both of us. My recovery took a year. My counts improved slowly. I had immune problems, bone pain, fatigue, therapy. Sunlight was hard at first. Not physically, emotionally. I had spent so long indoors that open space felt unsafe. Arthur had a garden. The first week, I sat 5 minutes outside, then 10, then an hour. I went barefoot once. Grass felt absurd. I enrolled in classes. Not because I needed to become a corporate titan immediately, because I had missed school, real school. I was 19 and reading at an advanced level, but had never taken a normal exam, never sat in a classroom with other students, never had to raise my hand. The first time a professor called on me, I froze. Not because I didn't know the answer, because no adult had ever asked my opinion in public. The first months outside the estate were stranger than the courtroom. Courtrooms made sense. Questions, answers, evidence. A person spoke. Another person challenged it. Then the record kept both. Normal life had no record. At Arthur's house, nobody asked permission before opening a refrigerator because nobody needed permission. That terrified me. The first morning, a housekeeper said, "Breakfast is in the kitchen." I waited. She looked at me. "What, am I allowed?" "Am I allowed?" Her face broke. Not dramatically, just one tiny movement around the eyes. Of course. I stood there anyway. She walked away instead of watching me eat. That helped. The second week, Arthur gave me a phone. New. Mine. No monitoring application. No location requirement. No camera access. I stared at it. "What is the code?" "Whatever you choose." "No. The house code." He frowned. "Meters for what?" "For the phone. There isn't one." I looked at him. "Who can open it?" "You. Who else? Anyone you give the code to." I held the phone like it might explode. Arthur, I just he sat across from me. "Your father built everything around access." I nodded. "Who enters? Who sees? Who decides?" "Yes, this house has security." I stiffened. He continued quickly. "For outsiders." He placed his own phone on the table. "You do not owe me your password. You do not owe me your room key. You do not owe me your medical records." I stared. "Then how do you know if I'm safe?" His face changed. "I ask." That answer was so simple it felt impossible. Therapy began because my doctors recommended it. I almost refused because Richard had once threatened to call me unstable whenever I resisted him. The therapist, Dr. Sen, noticed immediately. "If you say no, nothing bad happens." I stared at her. "That's not true. Is there off Yours? How do I know?" "You don't yet." She folded her hands. "So test it." I waited, winked, then said, "No." She nodded. "Okay." The session ended. No punishment, no chart note calling me difficult, no security, no extra blood draw. I went back the next week. That was how trust began. Not with promises, with repetition. No meant no, again. At school the problem was different. Nobody knew my history at first. Arthur arranged privacy, but I refused private tutoring. I wanted a classroom. The first day, I sat in the back. 30 students. Laptops. Coffee. Someone complaining about parking. A girl beside me whispered, "Do you know if he takes attendance?" I almost laughed. She had no idea how extraordinary the question was. Attendance. As if absence could be ordinary. As if a person could leave and still be expected tomorrow. I said, "No idea." She smiled. "I'm Tessa. Anya. That was my first friend. Not nurse, not lawyer, not investigator. Friend." I hated public speaking. She made me order coffee for us because she said, "You cannot become a terrifying corporate heiress if you're afraid of a barista." I glared. "Who told you?" She froze. I realized what I had said. She had found the news story. Everybody eventually did. Sorry. I waited for the change. Pity. Curiosity. The question everyone asked, what was the room like? Instead she said, "I still need the coffee." I laughed so hard people looked over. That was friendship too. People sometimes ask why I studied ethics instead of hematology. Because hematology explained what my blood was. Ethics explained why that had never given anyone a right to it. I learned words for things I had experienced without language. Coercion, surrogate, decision-making. Capacity, independent advocacy. Conflict of interest. Institutional capture, documentation gaps. Every term felt like a light switching on, not because clinical language was emotionally satisfying, because naming a mechanism makes it harder to hide. One professor assigned a case about a family pressuring an adult daughter to donate a kidney to her brother. I could not breathe. The classroom disappeared. Glass walls. Needle tray. Julian's voice. "It's what you're for." I stood. The professor stopped. "Anya, I need to leave." Of course. No one blocked the door. I walked outside. Tessa followed 5 minutes later. She sat beside me on the steps. No questions. I said I hate that people write these like debates. She looked over. "What?" The cases. Okay. Should she donate? Does family duty matter? What if he dies? Tessa waited. I said, sometimes the question is already wrong. What should it be? Can she say no without losing her home, her money, her safety? Tessa nodded. Then write that, so I did. The paper became my first academic publication. Not because it described my case. I never mentioned myself. It argued that consent should be evaluated in the context of practical consequences. A yes obtained under threat of homelessness is not clean consent. A yes obtained under family-controlled medication is not clean consent. A yes from someone who cannot contact an outside advocate is not clean consent. The journal accepted it. Arthur printed the email and framed it. I took it off his wall. He was offended. Why? It is offended. Why? It's embarrassing. It is your first publication. It's an email. It says, accept it. Arthur. He smiled. Fine. He put it in the library instead. We compromised badly. My medical recovery was less symbolic. Blood counts, infections, energy. Months when stairs felt impossible. A fever sent me to the hospital once and I panicked when a nurse reached to my arm. She stopped immediately. Do you want someone else? I shook my head. No. Do you want me to explain first? Yes, she did. Every step, every tube, every reason. The procedure took twice as long. Nobody complained. That was medicine becoming medicine again. The first time, my marrow showed meaningful recovery. My hematologist smiles. Good trend. I stared at the chart. How good? Good. Can it fall again? Yes. Can I donate? Not now. Ever. Maybe. I hated maybe. Then realized maybe was honest. Richard had always promised certainty because certainty made obedience easier. You will be fine. Julian needs this. You owe us. Real doctors use words like risk. Risk likely. We need more data. I learned to love uncertainty when it came from honesty. Arthur's company became another classroom. He never stopped trying to bring me into meetings. I kept refusing. Then one afternoon I overheard him arguing with a hospital subsidiary executive on speakerphone. The executive said, family authorization is standard. I walked into Arthur's office. No. Both men stopped. Arthur looked at me. The executive said, excuse me. No, family authorization is not enough for a competent adult patient. The executive sounded irritated. This is complicated. It gets complicated when companies make convenience sound like consent. Arthur leaned back. He was smiling. I pointed at him. Don't. He raised both hands. The executive asked who I was. Arthur said, someone you should listen to. That led to my first policy review. Not board power, research. I read procedures. Found places where family members could override patient communication too easily. Found contracts where private clinics reported to payers before patients. Found gaps. Wrote a memo, 42 pages. Arthur hated the formatting. Approved the recommendations. That was the first time I understood the empire could become a tool without becoming a throne. Power's not sitting at the head of the table. Power was changing the form so a nurse somewhere had permission to stop and ask, did the patient say yes? I became obsessed with biomedical ethics. Not medicine exactly. Systems, consent, rare blood registries, donor protection, oversight, pornobricite. The phrase, golden blood, made me angry. People romanticized it, and while it is rare, that is a medical fact. Rare does not mean magical. It does not mean a person with it belongs to anyone else. I worked with legitimate hematologists, learned how rare donor networks should operate. Voluntary, protected, tracked, never family-owned. I testified before a medical board about my case. One regulator asked, why didn't any doctor report the patterns sooner? I said, because my father paid people to see each event as isolated. That became the lesson. Abuse loves fragmentation. One nurse sees a drawer. One contractor sees a prescription, one accountant sees a payment, nobody sees the cage. Systems have to be designed to connect dots. Arthur funded a donor protection institute. I refused to put my name on it. We called it the Independent Rare Donor Alliance. Every registered donor received an outside advocate. Every repeated high-volume request triggered review. Every minor had direct oversight. No family could act as sole decision-maker for an adult donor. The relief formed collection without strict authorization. Boring. Beautiful. Mara joined us. The nurse who left the tablet the day she walked into my office years later. I stood. She looked at me. You're taller. I was 17. You were terrifying. I laughed. The rest. You left the tablet. She smiled. Accident, sure. We hugged. She had lost her job after Richard fired her, then spent months helping investigators. Arthur offered her money. She refused. I offered her a role. She accepted, not because she owed me, because she wanted the work. That distinction mattered to both of us. Richard's trial lasted 6 weeks. He never looked at me during testimony. I described the glass room, the blood drawers, the locked door, the lies about adoption, the hospital. The moment Arthur arrived, defense counsel asked, "Your grandfather is worth billions, correct?" "Yes." "You now stand to inherit significant wealth." "Yes." "And this testimony benefits your position?" I looked at him. My identity existed before the inheritance. He tried again. "Isn't it possible you interpreted medical care as abuse because you were isolated?" "No." "Why not?" "Because medical care requires consent, silence." That line traveled online. I wish more basic truths did. Ilara took a plea. She testified against Richard on Helena's case. The cooperation reduced her sentence. People online called it unfair. Maybe. But her testimony established that Richard had arranged the medication interference that preceded Helena's death. Not enough for a clean murder charge at first. Enough for homicide-related prosecution after additional evidence surfaced. Richard was convicted on multiple major counts. The sentences stacked into decades. The exact number mattered less than the fact that the doors finally locked on his side. Julian did not die in the emergency room. He survived the hemorrhage. Barely. That was important to me. Not because I forgave him, because he did not want my freedom tied to his death. He spent months in treatment. His condition remained serious. He later pleaded guilty to conspiracy and unlawful confinement-related offenses connected to the years after he turned 18. His sentence was shorter than Richard's. Then, people wanted blood. I wanted accuracy. Julian wrote me one letter. I opened it. Anya, I told myself you were helping me. I told myself Dad knew what he was doing. I told myself because you survived every draw, it couldn't be that bad. I stopped, then continued. You wrote, "The truth is, I liked being the person everyone protected." That sentence was honest. Then I knew it cost you. I just did not want to look. I read it twice. No apology can refund a childhood, but truth still has value. I wrote back one line. You were sick. That explains your fear. It does not erase your choices. Nothing more. Arthur retired when I was 25. Not because I was ready to inherit everything, because he was tired. He had spent decades building Vance Global, energy, shipping, medical manufacturing, technology, an empire too large for one family story. The board wanted me as CEO immediately. I said no. Arthur looked offended. You are the heir. I am 25. You are smarter than half of them. That is not the standard. He laughed. I took a board seat instead. Then another operating role. Learned, failed. But yelled at by people who were not afraid of my grandfather. Yet I made a terrible acquisition recommendation my first year. Lost money. Owned it. No one locked me in a room. No one took blood. Failure became normal. That was healing too. At 29, I became CEO. I became normal. That was healing too. At 29, I became CEO. Not crowned. Appointed. Board vote. Independent directors. Governance. Arthur complained the process took too long. I told him that's because it works. He pretended not to be proud. Our first major initiative under my leadership was not luxury. It was medical transparency. Every Vance-owned healthcare contractor had to maintain independent patient advocacy. No hidden home procedures. No sole family reporting channel. No off-book medical payments. People said the policy was too strict. Then an audit uncovered 3 unrelated coercion cases across different subsidiaries. We intervened. 3 people got out. That was better than vengeance. One case involved an elderly man whose nephew had been pressuring him for plasma donations for money. Another involved a young athlete being overused in a private experimental program. Another involved a woman whose husband controlled access to her medication. Different details, same principle, bodies becoming assets. I understood that pattern. Years later, I visited the old Vance estate where I had been confined. Arthur wanted to demolish it. I said no. We converted the wing. The glass room became a training center for clinicians and patient advocates. No dramatic museum, no chain displayed. No blood bags, like just a plaque outside the door. Consent is not assassinated. The glass remained. That was my choice. On the first training day, a resident stood inside. She looked uncomfortable. Why keep the walls? Because people think abuse always looks hidden. She looked through the glass at me. Sometimes everyone can see. I nodded. And still no one asked the right question. What question? I smiled. Do you want this? She runted down. Arthur came to the opening. He used a cane. Older now. He stood beside me. Helena would hate this place. I know. She'd want it burned. Probably, he smiled. You were calmer than she was. That's insulting. He laughed. Calmer than she was. That's insulting. He laughed. Then got serious. I felt her. I looked at him. Yes? And you? Yes? He nodded. Yes? He nodded. No, excuses. We had gotten better at that. He said, I am sorry. I believed him. Not because he was perfect. Because he had changed behavior. Apologies without behavior are decoration. Arthur spent his final years funding oversight work and annoying regulators. He died when I was 32, peacefully, at home. I sat beside him. He held my hand. My left, the one with all the old needle scars. He traced one with his thumb. I wish I found you sooner. So do I. I thought you were dead. I know. He closed his eyes. Then said, Don't turn the company into a shrine. I laughed through tears. Trust me. He died that night. The inheritance became mine. Legally. Financially. The company never felt like a prize. It felt like responsibility. I sold the private jet Rajat once used, kept Arthur's old library, expanded the donor alliance, built education programs for clinicians, and refused every magazine profile that called me the girl with golden blood. One interviewer insisted, But that is what made you famous. No, what did? I looked at her. The people who documented what was happening. Mara. The investigators. The doctors who finally said no. Arthur. Evidence. Systems. People love biological destiny stories. Rare blood. True heiress. Illegitimate son. Patriarchy. Inheritance. It sounds ancient. Clean. But biology. Inheritance. It sounds ancient. Clean. But biology did not save me. A nurse leaving a door open did. A lawyer believing a teenager did. A doctor refusing the dangerous draw did. A grandfather asking permission before touching me did. Those were the moments. I never donated blood again for years. Not because I hated Julian. Because my body needed recovery. Later, when my doctors cleared me and I chose to join a rare donor registry, I stared at the consent form for 20 minutes. Mara sat beside me. You don't have to. I know. Really, I know. I signed one small voluntary donation for a patient I never met. The Reveillette, no locked room, no debt. I cried afterward, but because of pain, because the bag looked exactly like the bags from childhood, and nothing about it was the same. The phlebotomist asked, Are you okay? Yes. Want to stop? That question. Want to stop? That question. Want to stop? I smiled. No. This time, no meant no. Yes meant yes. And either answer belonged to me. That was what Richard never understood. He thought my blood made me valuable because somebody else needed it. He thought Julian's need created a claim, thought fatherhood created ownership. He thought inheritance created permission. All wrong. Need is not ownership. Bloodline is not morality. Love without consent is not love. And survival does not make suffering sacred. I would have preferred a normal childhood. School, friends, sunburn, bad dates, a mother who lived, a father who was safe. No empire is worth trading those for. People sometimes tell me, but look what you became. I hate that. I became myself in spite of what happened, not because of it. The glass room did not build me. I escaped it. There is a difference. On my 35th birthday, I woke before sunrise. No staff, no board, no cameras. I made coffee. Opened the balcony doors. Cold air entered. I stood outside barefoot. Ridiculous. Freezing. Then my phone buzzed. A donor alliance alert. A hospital that flagged a family attempted to override an adult patient's refusal. The independent advocate had intervened. Procedure paused. Patient safe. I read the message twice, then replied, Good. Follow up directly with the patient. That was the empire I cared about. Not towers, not stock, not the Vance name. A door opening before someone disappeared behind it. I looked at the scars on my arm. Faded now, but still visible. For 13 years people took from me because they've built a story where I owed them. Richard saved you. Julian needs you. Family comes first. You are useful. You are lucky. Every sentence pointed toward the same lie. Your body belongs to us. It never did. The emergency room proved that. The doctor said no. Arthur asked permission. The law wrote my name back into the record. And eventually, I learned to do the same thing for myself. My name is Anya Vance. I am not a blood type. I am not an inheritance. I am not proof that one branch of a family is more legitimate than another. I am not the girl in the glass room. I am the woman who can open the door. And now, every system I control has one rule above all others. No one gets to call ownership love again.